Anyway, meanwhile, local Republican lawmakers in Wisconsin and Michigan, two states that'll matter next election, are using their lame duck session to take power away from the incoming Democratic governors. In Wisconsin, Republicans held a hearing today for legislation that would, among other things, prevent the new governor from withdrawing from a lawsuit challenging Obamacare and make it harder for him to implement state laws. Governor Scott Walker downplayed the significance of this plan while talking to reporters tonight, according to the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. He said that, quote, I actually think if you look at much of what they're talking about, it's codifying practice for all the talk, this talk about reigning in power. It really does anyway. And in Michigan, Republicans have legislation that would allow the legislature, a Republican legislature, instead of the attorney general, to intervene in court cases and take campaign finance oversight away from the Secretary of State. Howard, this is sort of revanchism, as they say. You don't want the new guys to come in to have any power.
Well, as I said, they're building a citadel for themselves that looks inward, not outward, and they're laying traps and mines outside the walls of the citadel everywhere they can. This is not an expansive party. This is not a theory of expanding your tent or expanding your appeal. It's focusing in on what you can protect.
The logger.
Yeah, what you can protect. The logger, the treasury, the innards of the castle. That's what they're doing.
How do you see it, Ryan?
Well, I think in every state, this is not just a Republican thing. It happens to be in Wisconsin and Michigan right now, but we've seen this in years past. Constitutionally, I question whether some of this stuff can even be done.
You mean passing statutes as you lose?
In order to reduce the power of a state office just because an incoming member happens to be of another political party, I think there are some constitutional questions here that some of this stuff will never see.
Well, let me ask you a broader question. Howard got to it, and you'll get into it. I want you all into it. When your party recognizes you're facing a demographic time bomb, now this assumes a couple things, like African Americans are going to stay 90% Republican or Democratic, which has been since the 60s, but they weren't always that way. They used to be about 2 to 1, and more the party of Lincoln. And Hispanics are in play because you've got people, Mexican Americans and Cuban Americans are very much in play, especially Mexican Americans. They're not all lefties. Puerto Ricans may be, but these are just patterns. I would ask you, I think the Republican Party is girding itself for being a minority party, whether it's voter suppression, whatever games, rather than trying to get in the game of trying to be a majority party.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times short-term gain is focused on in this modern era of politics in a way that makes it really hard to see how the Republican Party sustains in long term. And you're absolutely right. I mean, voters, including Hispanic voters, Latino voters, are not monolithic. There was a time that Cuban voters were almost reliably Republican.
And in California and Texas, voting heavily Republican.
Yes, and in states like Texas, I mean, in states like Florida, which make a huge difference. But after Reince Priebus, remember that seems so long ago in 2013, said that they have to look out and learn how to look outward and learn how to make that pitch to a broader group of people. Republicans have turned and gone the exact opposite way, doubling down on a very small portion of the base and really catering their policies to that.
I think a lot of Republicans see that and want to pivot. And I think that they want to broaden. I think it becomes very difficult when the president just dominates the discussion. And frankly, you had a lot of voters go to the polls, Republicans. If they didn't like the president, they were not voting for their member of Congress. You had members of Congress, state senators, state representatives with favorability ratings at 55, 60% get 45% of the vote because you had Republican voters going in saying, I'm a Republican, but I can't do it this time.
There's a rural imbalance, a growing rural tilt in the Senate for constitutional reasons because of 2 senators for each state. You've got a lot of Republican senators up in red districts in 2020. You've got Mitch McConnell up in Kentucky, where Trump won by more than 20 points. Unless Mitch McConnell, and I don't mean to make him a bigger player than he is, but he's a big player here, unless and until he and the senators respect his political acumen, unless and until Mitch McConnell says enough, we've got to change our tactics and change our vision, nothing's going to happen. But what Mitch has said is that we're going to keep putting judges on the federal bench with our majority of 53 Republican senators, and we're going to build a legal citadel to go along with the political one to allow us to play out this string that we have committed ourselves to.
Sounds like John Marshall, the early Federalist, did that.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.